end of the story, right? Because all the stories, all the fairy tales, they end there. They end at the finding, the joining, the marriage. And then it's the end. You don't know what happens after that except that it's happily ever after. That's all you know, right? This creates a sense in us, or a belief in us, that our goal is the marriage itself, as if it's the end. It's the end of, it's the destination itself. Well, this is actually very untrue. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayah, it's an ayah itself, meaning it's a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do signs do? Signs direct you, signs lead you, signs point to something. So it's supposed to be pointing to something greater, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created that relationship, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who put love and mercy in that relationship. So we have to use it to seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not for its own sake. I think we make a lot of mistakes, and one of the mistakes we make is we think that the story ends there. So what happens if you think that the story ends there? A couple things happen. One, if you never get there, say you never get there. You never get married, or maybe you're divorced, or maybe you're widowed. So all of a sudden you feel as though you're missing something. You feel as though you're incomplete in a way. If it's just a means, if it's a tool to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's one means, but there are many other means as well. Okay? So that's one thing that happens, is that if you never get there, you feel that you haven't fulfilled your purpose of creation. This is a problem. And I think that what happens is we teach our daughters growing up that, it's like almost as if, this sounds funny, but it's like you were created to get married, right? And so by the time they get to be 22, it's like your clock is ticking. Why haven't you fulfilled your purpose of creation yet, right? Why aren't you married yet? Well, this is so from the very beginning we have to change the way we see marriage. Marriage is, yes, Allah, as the Prophet ﷺ says, it's half of your deen. What does that mean, half of your deen? Well, anyone who's been married, which most of you in this room are, know that it's one thing to talk about patience. It's one thing to read about patience. It's one thing to talk about sacrifice. It's one thing to read about sacrifice. But it's another thing to really experience it and learn it. And really there are few other ways to learn these concepts, right? These beautiful virtues than in the institution of marriage, right? So when you think about half your deen, well, you can really develop half of your deen by being married, because you're going to have to learn about patience, right? It's not just going to be a concept anymore. You're going to have to learn about sacrifice. So what I want to begin with is by saying this. Marriage is not the ending, but rather the beginning. It's the beginning of the journey, not the ending. So we kind of have to unlearn everything we learned growing up, all the fairy tales, we kind of have to unlearn it. The story doesn't end at marriage, it begins there. So then the question is, this mawadda and rahmah, this love and mercy. We have this concept, we read it on the wedding invitations, and then what happens after that? Why don't we have that in our relationships? I want to talk about a couple things which I think we maybe do wrong. To begin with, I want to talk about needs. And we've talked a lot about respect here. And I think that's extremely important because, and this is probably something you guys already know, but I really want to drive this point home, and that is, when all boils down, what they find is that the anatomy of an argument between a man and a woman usually can be boiled down to a man feeling disrespected and a woman feeling unloved. What this means is oftentimes a man, let's start with the man, a man might do something that makes a woman feel unloved. Right? It happens. Sometimes it happens quite often, right? So the man does something to make the woman feel unloved. How does she respond? Well, usually what women tend to do, what we tend to do, when we feel unloved, our knee-jerk reaction is actually to sort of respond with a little bit of attitude. And so what we end up doing is we respond to feeling unloved by being disrespectful. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. But there's a problem in that knee-jerk reaction, because what it does is it triggers the man to be even more unloving. Because when a man feels disrespected, it makes him more unloving and harsh. So this creates a cycle, okay? And some of these, some of the people who've been doing relationship counseling for a while call it the crazy cycle. And what it is it's this pattern of argumentation or conflict between a man and a woman where one of them feels disrespected, so therefore they respond by being unloving. The other one feels unloved, they respond by being disrespectful, and basically it's fuel to fire, right? So one just causes the other, and it's this cycle, and it's very difficult to break out of that cycle. Because when I feel unloved, I respond with disrespect. But guess what a man does when he feels disrespected? He responds by being unloving. So the question is, how do you break out of that cycle? They tell you two concepts to break out of that cycle. One is something we are very familiar with, and that is unconditional love. Unconditional love. What that means is that a man, even if he's feeling disrespected, continues to be loving. That will break out, that will make you break out of the cycle. Because when a woman feels loved, she's going to respond with respect. On the woman's side, now this is where it starts to become not as, we don't understand this concept as well. And that's something called unconditional respect. There was a lot of, comments being thrown out, which is that respect needs to be earned. You need to earn my respect. So see, we as women, it's very natural for us to love unconditionally, right? It's like part of our nature. Yes, we love unconditionally. But if you ask a man, and this is just, this is a generalization. If you ask a man, what is the most important thing to you? If you had to choose between being unloved and being not respected or disrespected, a man will choose to be unloved over being disrespected. And for a woman, it's the other way around. If I, as a woman, have to choose between being unloved, feeling unloved, or feeling disrespected, the woman will choose love over respect. That is not to say that a woman doesn't want respect. And it is not to say that a man doesn't want love. Please understand, this is about primary need. So the primary need for a man is to feel respected, and it even is more important than to feel loved. But we as women, we make the mistake of being very, very loving, but not very, very respectful. And that means that we are not really giving him his primary need. But we're very good at giving love. And we understand the concept of unconditional love, but it's very hard for us to internalize the concept of unconditional respect. And what unconditional respect means is even when I feel unloved, I will always still be respectful. Now once, so when you read this and you see this concept, I decided to look into the Sunnah and see, and in the Hadith and in the Quran, what does the Prophet ﷺ say? And when you look and see what the Prophet ﷺ says, and the advice that he gives to the women, and the advice that he gives to the men, you find it very much in line with this. When the Prophet ﷺ is advising women, he advises them differently than he advises men. So men, when he advises them, he talks a lot about being kind, loving to women, right? Taking care of women, being, this concept of kindness and love. And yet with the women, the advice is not be loving to your husband. Why do you think that is? Because it's already, we're really good at loving, but we're not so good with respect, especially when we feel unloved. So the advice again and again to women from the Prophet ﷺ is to having to do with respect. Obeying your husband, this is the concept of respect is really what's focused on when the Prophet ﷺ advises women. And what does unconditional respect mean? See, this is the thing. A lot of times women might think that if I'm unconditionally respectful, he's just going to walk all over me. But it's actually the opposite. Because when a man feels respected, so let me give you a scenario. So say something happens and you feel like it was inconsiderate or you feel like unloved. it made you feel unloved. Now you can respond in one of two ways. You can respond with disrespect, which is our need. Let's just be honest, that's our knee-jerk reaction. Somebody hurts us, like it's attitude. So you can respond that way, but that's actually going to trigger more of what hurts you. That's just going to trigger more of what hurts you initially. It's not going to get you what you want, which is love, ultimately. Ultimately, what we all want is love. So when you respond that way, you're just going to get more of what caused the problem to begin with, and you're not going to get what you actually want. But if, on the other hand, you still keep that level of respect, and that doesn't mean you don't explain, I mean, you express your feelings, but you do it with respect. What ends up happening is you'll get that love that you wanted. Because when a man feels respected, he responds with love. In terms of talking about this unconditional respect, it means that even if I feel hurt, or even if I feel like you're not being loving, I will still respect your wishes. You'll still have my respect. And if a man feels that way, you'll notice that will make him soften. And usually the best way to make a man become very, very loving, and this is interesting. It's like an exercise, right? You go up to your significant other, your husband, and you say, as a woman says to her husband, I really respect you. And then he asks, he's going to be very shocked, first of all. He's going to be like, what did they teach you? Where's my wife, right? No, I really, but you have to say it from a place of sincerity. You really have to mean it. So you just, so before you do this, you have to think of, it has to be coming from the heart, okay? So you have to be ready for the next question, what he's going to ask is why. So you say, I really respect you. And he's going to first, again, have a heart attack and be very shocked. And then he's going to be like, what made you say that? Where did that come from? He's going to want more explanation. And at that point, you say something that really is sincere, something that you really respect about him. And what you'll find in this exercise is he'll be really nice to you. He'll be very loving. Because you have, again, it's just very simple. When a person feels that when their primary need is fulfilled, then they can give. When a person feels like their primary need is not being given to them, they become very ungenerous, ungiving. You can't give. You don't give when you feel empty. So if you give that, you will get what you want. Two other things. I just think that in terms of how we go about things, I think maybe in the wrong way. In this concept, okay, so we have this concept of love. Sometimes we just drown people in our love, right? But sometimes, out of love, we may actually act disrespectfully. And I'll give an example. I thought actually the soda example was a really good example of that. I'll just tell the story. Somebody gave this example. I guess they had a no soda policy in the house, and the husband wanted soda. I feel his pain. And so he had to hide the soda. Okay, so then his wife found the hidden soda and just dumped it all out into the sink or whatever, and then put the empty container back. So when he went to drink it, it was empty. So let's reflect on this story. In her mind, she might think she's being loving, right? She's being loving because she's trying to protect his health. But this is extremely disrespectful in his eyes. Because basically she's treating him like a little kid. So we have to be very careful that, we even when we give love, sometimes it can be very disrespectful. So being careful that loving your husband doesn't mean that he becomes your child. There's a difference, like the sister said, between being his mother and being his wife. You never want him to feel like you're mothering him. That is going to make him respond in not such a good way. The other thing I think we do is we put our husbands at the center of our universe. We put our husbands at the center of our universe. I'm going to explain what that means. It's one thing to respect your husband. It's one thing to love your husband. but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be the center of our universe. And when you put another person at the center of your universe, it actually just causes a lot of problems both for you, and something else happens. This is very interesting. They actually, like, when you chase after someone too much, guess what they do?
Run away.
They run away. They run away. It's just it's actually a characteristic of dunya. Anytime you run after the dunya, it runs away from you. The more you run after dunya, the more it runs away from you. So when you love your husband, and when you serve your husband, and when you respect your husband, make sure that you're doing it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind. Your center is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything you give to your husband or to your children should be because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It should be by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have the right focus, you'll find that all the things in your life actually start to come together. And the people, like the people who used to chase after and they would run away, once you refocus and your focus is now Allah, those same people will come after you. You guys understand? This is very conceptual, but do you understand what I'm saying? Let me give you this hadith. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, the companion came up to him, and one of the companions came up to him and asked him a question. And this is really like the golden question. What can I do to have Allah love me and the people love me? Which is basically what we all want. We want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's love, and we want the people's love. The Prophet ﷺ gave him such a profound answer. He said, "Izhad fi dunya," so have zuhud in the dunya, meaning that you aren't running after dunya. You're not in love with dunya. Okay? That you're not attached. You're detached from dunya and the material things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love you. Have zuhud in the dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will love you. And that's pretty obvious. But there's something else less obvious. He said, have zuhud, this sense of detachment, from what is in the hands of people, and the people will love you. So this is like, it's because when someone is needy, or someone is like chasing after, or kind of, they feel suffocated, right? And it actually is it makes them back up more. But if you stop, so then this concept of neediness, so really if you look at this hadith, subhanAllah, you're not needing from what's in the hands of the people. You're not coveting what's in the hand. You don't seek your fill from the people. You seek your fill from Allah. You seek your fill from Allah. And something amazing happens when you do that. The people actually love you more. So it's kind of it's like counterintuitive of what we think. We think that the more we run after people, the more we're clingy, cling to people, the more they're going to love us, but it's the opposite. The more that you are independent, in the sense that again, what I mean by this is that your fill, your self-worth, is defined by your relationship with Allah, not by your relationship with this or that person. So this is something that, really, it's a spiritual concept, but ultimately it's a relationship concept, because you will find that the more that you base your self-worth on your relationship with Allah, and the more you fill that emptiness with your relationship with Allah, the more healthy your relationships with people will become. You're no longer running after the people and what they can give you. Because, trust me, that makes people run away. And especially, like I said, men. Once you become like, I'm okay, I'm not, this is the problem as women, subhanAllah. We feel like, again, going back to that fairy tale mentality. Think about Cinderella for a second. What was her situation? What was her circumstance?
That's true.
She was like, she was basically a maid. She was basically abused, all right? This abused person in this very helpless situation. And then what happened? She needed this prince to come save her from that situation. She was very dependent on him to save her. What about Sleeping Beauty? She needed, exactly. Well, she basically was dead for all practical purposes, right? She's in a coma or something. And no, that's Sleeping Beauty. That's why she's called Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty. She's sleeping. I know my fairy tale. And so she's sleeping. She's basically in a coma though, because she doesn't wake up unless he kisses her. You guys understand the concept here. Snow White, same thing. She's like a maid to these little people. Same concept across the board, and that is, I am not complete. I will not be saved. I need a man to come save me. So what happens is we just become so needy, and the moment we don't have whatever it is that we need him to give us, we just break. We fall apart. And that's because we're dependent on something other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it puts you in a very vulnerable situation, a very vulnerable position, and it will actually damage your relationships. Your relationships will be much stronger if you get your fill from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're not dependent on someone else to come save you. The other thing is that when you're appealing to, with regards to expressing emotion, that's inshallah where I'm going to end. A lot of times what happens is this. When a woman expresses her emotions, men react in kind of unusual ways. So sometimes you might be upset about something, and you express it to your husband, and his reaction is defensive usually. But he does something really interesting usually, and that is sort of minimizes your feelings, or tells you like what's the big deal? Like you're overreacting. You're so dramatic. You're sounding familiar. The idea here is that why is this happening? Basically, when you're expressing your feeling to your husband, why is he responding by telling you you really shouldn't feel that way? What's happening here? What do you guys think is happening? Why does he respond that way? Whereas if you tell your friend, she's going to be like, oh my God, I am so sorry, and I understand how you feel, and you have every right in the world to feel that. Why does he react differently, you think?
I mean, different perceptions, or, like I view it in a different way than he does, whatever the situation.
Okay, yes.
It's either he doesn't want to take responsibility for the problem, or he doesn't want to fix it.
Okay.
Maybe
Avoidance, okay.
Or maybe he doesn't understand exactly how you're feeling. Like if you're saying it in a nagging voice or an upset voice, like maybe you should be more calm or to him. That way
Okay.
he can read to you. But
Okay. A lot of times the reason why he responds that way is it's actually a defense mechanism. The reason is that he hears, and especially, if you're upset, usually, if you're upset at him, so then he feels blamed. So he feels kind of like you're attacking him, and so as a defense, he wants to say that, well, you don't really have a right to feel that way, because if you do have a right to feel that way, then that means I'm a really horrible person. So it's a defense mechanism. So how do you break out of that?
It's not a big deal.
Well, okay, so one thing you could do is just try to suppress all your feelings, right? But that's not really healthy. And it's going to come out in different ways, and being passive-aggressive is not pretty either. So the idea here is, yes?
Talk to your girlfriends.
Okay, but what if it's something that that's something that has to do with him, that you need to communicate? Basically, you're needing to communicate something that has to do with him, but it's a negative feeling.
Go back to what Noah said, is that use the I
Okay.
as opposed to blaming you. So it's
Okay.
like, this is what I need.
Exactly.
Instead of you're not fulfilling this or that.
So it has everything to do with the way in which you communicate your feelings. So you can start out the statement with, I'm not blaming you. Saying I'm not blaming you actually is gonna now he can sort of put down his guard. Okay, good, I'm not being attacked. So I don't have to have that shield up, which is going to be, whatever, you're basically invalidating your feeling. That's a shield. So if you start out by saying, I'm not blaming you, but rather, I feel, like you said, I statements, I feel this, I'm not blaming you for it, but I feel this when this happens. And there's a structure to say this, and you'll find that the response is very, very different. That it will end up being more understanding and less minimizing. Yes.
I say also, sometimes it's the situation and not a character trait, which we often, including
Yes.
myself, will say, well, you're like this,
Yes.
versus the situation,
Yes.
where it makes
There-
it much.
Like there's like a structure. Actually, okay, so you know the book. This is just there's many books, but one book is Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and there's there's something called a love letter in that book, and basically the whole point of the love letter, it's just a structure to share negative emotions in a way that will not induce this defensive response. But basically, I mean, just generally, it's about saying I'm not blaming you, not giving blaming statements like you do this or you always, and statements like always and never. We like to use it a lot, but you really, we that's something that'll shut someone down. That'll shut someone down because it's like it feels like being like a lack of appreciation. That's what it feels like. And one of the main complaints that men have is that we're not appreciative enough. Showing appreciation and showing respect. And if you think about it, appreciation really is one of the manifestations of respect. And so a lot of men, to them, respecting them has to do with showing appreciation as well. So just getting away from the defense, the attack mode. I felt this when this happened. And she made a very good point that sometimes it's situational. It's not you are this certain way. But when this thing happened, I felt this. Okay? So inshallah, what I'm going to do, I'm going to end there and then open it up. Questions, comments. What are some things that you think, like, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, okay, I love everything you said. And I guess maybe a lot of people or a lot of women are also thinking of this like, yes, we have those feelings, or we're very reactive instead of being proactive, or yes, it would have been great to think of what I was going to say before I said it, but again, I was angry or upset, or the situation was this way, so I wasn't able to, enact all those little
Right.
like things before, like, okay, stop, breathe, think about what you're about to say, don't do this, be respectful, don't do this, don't do, we don't think like that. So I guess the question is, or I guess the comment is, in order for us to even start on that journey, because again, we're so automatic, like the way we are, so how do we change that? So I guess maybe one place where we can start is, going towards Allah, right? Asking for Allah's guidance and things like that. But I guess on a more practical sense, like what is something that you recommend we start with? How do we start?
Okay. I'm going to answer that question first in sort of a more like a deeper way. And that is, I really think that at the root of it, not seeking our husband to fulfill our deepest needs. Because no human being can fulfill your deepest needs. That's so crucial. Your deepest need can only be fulfilled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that, to begin with, we set ourselves up. Because what we're doing is, we have this need, it's very deep, it's very big, it's like this empty space, and we are saying, you're supposed to fill this, and you're not doing a very good job, so do a good job, and we get very upset, and that's why we pursue, and that just makes him run the other way. So from the very beginning, trying to not go at the relationship from an empty place, but rather from a full place. A place that's, full from our work with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you go with your gas, full, it's gonna be completely different. Because now I can work with you, but I'm not in a state of need, and sometimes desperate need. Also, like you said, there is a difference between reacting to something and responding to something. There's a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is a knee-jerk reaction. There's no, thought that happens. It's just like, this is what I feel, this is what I'm going to do. And responding is pausing, thinking, okay, and then choosing how you're going to react. But what we have to be is, obviously we want to respond rather than react. We have to do that. Otherwise, again, all this isn't going to be useful. Yes, did you have a...
I wanted to say that what you're saying logically makes sense.
Mhm.
But in essence, what you're saying is very scary.
Why is that?
It's scary because you're saying, I'm going to, if I'm already feeling disconnected with my spouse, and for example, maybe spiritually or emotionally or intimately wise, you're saying even disconnect yourself even more. And so I know, like it makes sense, and it's so profound what you're saying, but it can be also at the same time really scary to let that control go and really give it up in the hands of God and say, I really am going to let this go. And hopefully by letting it go.
Well, see, what you're getting at here, and what I'm saying is that you're not actually disconnecting more. You're doing the opposite, and it
Yeah.
really comes back to this concept. Okay, it's just think of it, dunya in general. We have this idea that if we keep running after it, we'll get it somehow, right? We're gonna reach it. If all I think about is dunya, how am I gonna get this, and then this car, and this money, and this person, and all that's all that occupies my mind. And every plan I make has to do with getting dunya. Guess what? I never get dunya that way. Like, we think that the more we run after dunya, the more we're gonna catch it. And it's the same thing with relationships too. We think that the more if we take this person and put them at the center of our life, and our entire life revolves around them, everything's gonna be okay, and we're gonna get them. But it's the opposite. That when we do that, anytime your focus is wrong, you don't actually get that thing you're focused on anyways. This is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made the heart to be focused on Him, and can only be filled by Him. And every other type of relationship is supposed to be an enabler to that relationship.